So they keep saying, oh, it will be for some use to my son and daughter. I wish our parents thought like that and created huge set of series of flats and properties in our names, which would have probably made us architects feel more comfortable and not worry about our earning and running our practices. But it's an interesting dimension, according to me, is to say that I feel that our parents, the elderly and maybe their parents, thought it enough to make their sons capable enough to able to earn their own living. But today you are making sure that they don't really have to earn because this flat is going to get them the rent to survive. So is there a question mark on our parenting is one sociologist way of looking at it. But if you look at the extreme opposite side, that where is the capital to create this kind of assets? This is what I was hearing from my co-panelists when we were having a pre-discussion on this thing. Who is taking maximum risk? Who is creating all these projects? How much are we able to really contribute to the nation's growth? And what role are we able to play? And these are the two sides of the development story that we are talking about today. And definitely, I think somewhere there is a strong connection which we are yet to explore between the kind of social impact it's going to have on the society, but whereas there is real wealth getting created, there is value to, and what you are making in the cities, and the way you have transformed your cities and the built form. I'm sure many of the architect friends in the audience and some of you who have been very consciously watching the way kind of built environment we are creating in the city, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that we have compromised a little bit on the quality of built environment that we have created in the last 2 or 3 decades. I'm not talking about construction quality of buildings, but I'm talking about the quality of the whole city as a unit, as a module, because otherwise we wouldn't have had issues like flooding of the cities, we wouldn't have had issues like, why are we thinking about smart cities today? I mean, is it something new that we are going to add to it? I mean, why we could not have been smarter even to begin with? So these are some of the issues which I have for my fellow panelists. And so I'm going to start with the permission of the other panelists to be a little selfish and favor my fellow. No, I have made up my mind. Yes, so we're going to start with Guru, who is a well-established architect, my senior, and in fact, he's the first architect I met when I moved in here into the city from Hyderabad. So I wanted to know, in this whole big picture that we are talking about, as architects, what is it that you feel that we can do to contribute and improve, assuming that right now our role, in my opinion, is right at the bottom. I mean, all the decisions are made and then you are approached to design a building project. Unless and so I want to do a little clarifying mark here, is that though architects become urban designers, planners and everything else, but here I'm talking about an architect's role primarily as a building designer. So don't misunderstand us that we are not responsible for creating bad cities. We are, but at the bottom end. Yes, some of us who have become planners are directly responsible for probably not being able to plan good cities. So from that perspective, what do you think we can?
I suppose that in the urban planning stages, many of architects, practicing architects, are not involved. This majorly has been a government's job of creating colonies. I mean, even in our earlier days, where I did my architecture in Bangalore, it was BDA which would look into the aspects of town planning. So probably this concept of having urban designers, practicing designers coming into this field is not very, so that means as an architect, as a practicing architect, that I'm really not aware. I mean, I'm just given a piece of land, or architects is a body, professional body. I think we are not really either. There must be fault from our side. We're not being involved, or they are not involving us during the design stages. Maybe Amravati would be a good example for us of involving architects. And as I heard from Mr. Jain, that they're involving a lot of competent. Secondly, I think as most of us architects, as you know, that we are probably trained to look at a micro level of a building. I'm just worried about my plot and things like that. So to look beyond that, probably we are not so competent, most of us. I'm not saying that for everybody, but most of us. So I suppose collaboration is one way, as we were discussing, that I think we should open up to architects from other countries, or even architects who are more qualified. I mean, let's say Hyderabad.
And why just architects? Probably other experts as well.
Everything
Yes.
experts, because with my personal experience, I can tell you that we were involved in one of the projects, which was a 400-acre development for Betas those days, with one of the world-renowned architects called SOM. Most of us know about them, and it was a real learning experience for me. So I think one is that from our side we need to open up and be a little more positive of taking things from others. This I think would go a long way, in improving the standards of urban design or buildings as well.
So interestingly, you mentioned one topic about how government should involve us in
Yes.
planning. So I would put this question a little later to you, but same question I'm putting to our builder friends is this: the whole role of government, which we keep talking about, sometimes regulatory and planning. So there are many, but I wanted to bring in this, get your feedback on this concept of the urban development authorities. So many of you would know that they were created sometimes in early 70s with a very defined purpose that it would involve in planning better cities and provide equal opportunities for all segments of the society to benefit from it. So, and Delhi had demonstrated it very well, where DDA would build housing which were self-finance schemes, and you would get LIG, MIG, HIG, all kind of. So there was a role for Urban Development Authority to plan and be the provider as well. Somewhere down the line, the UDA Act got little diluted, and also maybe because the economies opened up and they were asked to be facilitator rather than providers. And the moment you get into a facilitator mode and the private PPP model came in, it became market driven. Would you agree? So let me start with Pradeep. So he's looking very smart, and I always have a competition with my builder friend that I always thought architects should look smart, but he beats me all the time. So
You haven't looked at me.
no, I would still give him the marks for that. So Pradeep, tell me, so do you still feel that we need to somewhere reinvent or go back to that model where government still has to cater to that social need of the society, where you guys have been predominantly focusing on the private sector and the people who have the money bags to come and give it to you and you give them a flat or a villa?
Our major role, I would say that if you go back to the government's role, has to be in developing cities, just not around a major city. Like, let's take the example of Hyderabad. Now you see most of the development is happening on the western side of it. What's happening on the northern side? What's happening on the eastern side? And what's happening on the southern side, or the northeast or northwest? All these areas are being neglected. So what they need to provide is even satellite townships where they have, like, the best example I can give is today what is being planned for Amravati. I mean, that's fantastic. They have chosen an area for education institutions. That's how it should be.
No, so you're saying, should they stop at master planning, or should they also be the provider? Should they supply into the stock of the market?
No, they shouldn't. I mean, see, their job is to plan and stick to the plan. Where if they have created an area where they should see what's happening internationally, when we are trying to get so many international architects involved into it, and we are planning about how it has to be moved. We are having a lot of stress on a similar in just one area where we are putting on more and more and more of residential, where there is so much of stress on the infrastructure part of it.
So let me ask this to Mr. Bhatia, that since you are from Delhi and you have that experience of actually feeding the whole Lutyens Delhi and the master plan, and you know that how the city grew with making sure that there was enough space provided to accommodate the poorer sector of the society. How would you react to his comments that government should just be the planner and not be the provider?
Look, I think there is always an economics in something when you move into a PPP format. There's always an economics, and though I would not say government does not have an economic model around it, but government has also a sizable social model around it. When you move into a PPP model, there's an element of economics which come into play. So since you gave an example of Delhi, people who are familiar with Delhi, there's always a Lutyens Delhi, and there's always a place which had an emerging middle class, and there was always a place which had an affluence which was handled by DLF, and then it always had another circle after that. So effectively what government did was it allowed all three people to coexist, people who were affluent, people who were providers, and people who were, I would say, the service providers in terms of middle class. That I think is an example of things sort of going right. A similar thing, if you look at what happened in Chandigarh, when Chandigarh came into being, there's always the places, there are always, as they say, the SCOs and the booths where the shops would be, and there were always people who would around who would have smaller houses versus the large bungalows that Chandigarh would live. So effectively what government did was it not only made a regulation but also allowed that thing to prosper. I think what you refer to is if government still plays the role of a facilitator and ensures that there is no dilution or something like that, then I think they can stop at that as long as that sort of exists. But if the dilution happens in the manner that you give 4-acre plot for a school which becomes 2-acre, and another 2-acre goes into creating a recreation center which is offloaded for somebody to do activities, then I think there's a bit of dilution which happens, which is something which is, I think, got the whole BDA thing, or the whole UDA thing getting delayed. And that I would say is something which we see in Delhi. I'm sure you see in other cities around. So there is, in summary, there is a role a government would play. It can play a role as long as the social infrastructure responsibility is sort of managed by them. But I think as long as there no dilution happens, then you would still have a PPP playing an active role around.
So that's interesting. So what both of them have also said, apart from answering my question, is that somewhere they are highlighting the need to identify special use zones, like the concept of CBD in Delhi, where you are saying government must define the role of land use somewhere, right? Right, but
Education, 4 acres given.
Right.
If you do not have the education institutions placed in every areas where you earmark, if you let's take a 400 acre on a northern part of Hyderabad, there they should have education institution areas, hospitals, and then retail, light retail, heavy retail, high rise and low rise. Now in that zone, in a high rise zone, you cannot have a low rise then, because then you're balancing all the total basic infrastructure.
right, so that brings out two issues. So I will stick to my first observation. Well, I'll go back to I'll go to Mr. Ram Reddy here. Is that both of them talked about a very clearly defined land use and versus the mixed use, which is what we have been so used to seeing in Hyderabad. Practically, the CBDs that got developed in our city were a natural process of growth. If you look at it historically, if we start how the city grew was that Golconda was the starting point, then the Charminar came, so that became the CBD, and see the pattern how it is moving. Then the Musi River was the northern limit, but then it has to grow, so it came up to Abbots, so that was the North Hyderabad. So Abbots became the CBD, and from Abbots, that came down to Somaji Goda, Panjagutta, and this side of circle, and then you further moved to a high-tech city, Kukatpalli, and now we are again going back to Golconda somewhere. So it's full circle now. But all these CBDs where the major business happened were not really planned CBDs. They were part of very incremental and natural growth. So what do you think? So we are so used to that kind of a mixed development pattern in our city versus some of the examples which both of them have said that about a very clearly defined land uses. What would your take would be on this?
Good evening, friends. Can you hear? Yes. Yeah. Basically, he told about the western side of the development in Hyderabad is happening, other sites is not happening. Mr. Vivek told about the this agency, regulating agency's role, whether to be the facilitator or whether to be part of the development. But as you said, if you take, I take example of Hyderabad and Bangalore, both cities. In Hyderabad, actually, I feel the planning was much better compared to the Bangalore. In Hyderabad, the CBD, as you said, correct. From Golconda, it has moved to Charminar, Charminar to Koti Abbots, from Abbots to Bashirbagh to Amirpet, then moving this side. But this is one part. we are having other parts also. So you take the Dirs Nagar and LB Nagar, that is one part actually which is curtailing the major part of the like activity. Like same way if you take ECL, Kapra, Sainikpuri, that belt, that is the other part. And if you take the Kukatpalli and Miapur and Chandanagar, that belt, that is the other part. And if you take Mehdipatnam belt, Kaktianagar, Mehdipatnam and that belt. So that, see, as far as my knowledge, actually, majority we don't go. Suppose if you are in this part of the city, like let's say the western side of the city, going to Koti habits is rarely it happens because you don't require to, because all your requirements been fulfilled in this belt only. See, if you take any of the commercial activity or the educational or maybe the health facilities, I feel is a self-contained. The city's traffic today is being better compared to the Bangalore. If I say about the Bangalore, Bangalore is a self-centered city. You have actually in the Indiranagar, you have at Koramangala, and you have that inner ring road. All that activities are all actually only the employment centers. But whereas other social infrastructure being not developed, only slowly now is developing. Otherwise, I think you are all familiar with the Bangalore also, because I had to compare the two metropolitan cities. If you think about the social infrastructure, all the way you have to go to your Brigade Road, MG Road, or other center part of the Bangalore. That's the reason we see a lot of times like the traffic chaotic conditions. Today in Bangalore, if you have 4 appointments, minimum 2 appointments you have to cancel. From the airport, if you want to go to your point, you have to spend around 2 to 2.5 hours. So that's the worst part. Today, even the Ajim Premji, the Wipro chairman, says the city is choked because people have to come out of the city. So that is the worst part of the planning. And I say the so-called planners, we all see architect's role, as Gurra says, architect's role is limited in the planning. We have the town planning, we have the urban planning, we have the regional planning. This planning has to go in a totality. It cannot be planned in an isolated way only for a small Hyderabad place or small Bangalore place. So what I feel, Hyderabad is much better dispersed, and the natural planning has come. And I can attribute the part of this to the master plan, because here the master plan is a bit success compared to other metropolitan cities. That is a success today. Why Hyderabad's traffic is good? Why we are having the healthy environment? Today, why our roads are much better? Why our drainage system is better than actually even Chennai? Of course, we have to take into consideration the like topographical conditions, all those things. But definitely, but one thing good in Bangalore is actually they have the stormwater drain systems. Here, the sad part of our Hyderabad, our planners don't know, our architects don't know, we don't know. Nobody knows what is stormwater. We make a big areas.
Yeah,
so
I think
the Chennai situation, it might come to our place.
No, I think we need to not forget the 2002 floods in our city. So we are definitely in a problem zone. But let me be the devil's advocate today, and so don't think that what I'm saying is all my viewpoints. I'm just provoking them to say something. So what he's saying is that actually the whole planning works very well because it's all mixed use. So a residential property is used as an office because it gets you more money at the end of the return. So naturally property value goes up, it becomes more valuable. So you don't use it for residential anymore. You create an office building, you go to government and ask for change of land use. You create an office building. So from a residential infrastructure level, it ultimately gets into a business environment. The infrastructure does not support, and the city starts facing problems. How would you like to, let me ask. Yes.
So my point is that the government at the planning level should start encouraging the mixed growth, because that's how we have always been lived traditionally.
Right.
I mean, niche dukan, upar makan, that's been so instead of kind of encouraging people to convert residential, because you've defined it, this is a residential area only. Instead of doing that, in the planning stage itself, get this mixed use, because mixed use is the best way, because you don't have to travel much. So environmentally, it's a very positive thing, and infrastructure also and the safety, because it is active almost 24/7. When you have a mixed use plan. So why don't we take that as a positive point and include it in the designing, urban designing program? So I'm a great advocate for makes
Sorry,
them.
Rakesh, he had to take his thing.
I'm
So
sorry.
why don't you tell, what do you think about the mixed use versus clearly defined? I'm sure it has real repercussions in terms of asset values.
See, as far as the mixed use concerned, or say when we go into a development, right? What really defines what mode that we need to go in? It's not really decided by us. It's actually, as a developer, I'm trying to say is we don't have a choice. Okay, the market drives it. If the market demands that this particular locality, right now we talk about habits, right? If it requires a mixed use development, that is what we should be doing. But the origination of your question is whether the UDA, the government authorities, would have to really play what kind of a role, right? This all stemmed from that. You see, right now, what we have is